So here they are side by side, this being the 37611. Now this is actually a series strung set, so power supply is quite a bit different. No power transformer, no rectifier. Still got electrolytic filter caps, of course, but I think these are filter chokes in here. And obviously a different tube lineup. Like the output tube on this is a 25A6, I think. But also this has an inferior front end. This does not have the RF amp. So there's one less tuning section on the tuning capacitor, and there's one less tube. So it just has the 6A8 mixer oscillator tube and a filter cap, and then the oscillator and antenna tuning sections, but not the RF. So this is the extra tuned RF section I added in this. I have section very, very similar, but again, this is a bit inferior. The AVC seems to be simplified on this, for example. Can number is a little bit different, but same tubes. 6Q7 and 6K7. Alright, so let's look at what is the same here on the tuning. So this is one of the things I was puzzled about with this, is how exactly this goes in. I knew it went in somewhere down here. Well, now I can use this as a model and see exactly how it goes. Something like that. And this is what the original dial material looks like versus this reproduction, so you can see how different that is. And here's the RF deck I was talking about in this. This is just bottomed out. Those shock mounts are just shot. So now that I know the trick that you loosen up the screw in the back and then tip this forward, or rock this forward and then lift it up, I'll be able to replace those and get a couple capacitors down here. Now this also has some rubber mounts on the front. That's to cushion this against the front of the cabinet. I don't know if this one should have it or not. Let's peek under here. And you'll notice right away we don't get to see much because it's got a piece of metal over the entire bottom, which makes me wonder, did this have one originally? I don't know. I expect, yeah, it does have the same holes. I'm sure these are the same chassis pieces. So yeah, they would have screwed into here. It don't look like those are threaded. We'll probably have self-tapping screws or something on here. That's I think a snap mount. I don't know. Hard to say. Hard to say if this ever would have had a metal bottom or not. I'm inclined to think it very well could have, because this is actually a higher end model than this, and if this guy has one, it maybe very well have had one originally too. So also we can take a look at is here is what the antenna strip should look like that is missing from here. Here it is with the bottom removed. This I'm sure is one of the original fasteners, and probably the others were damaged or lost. So these are just snap-on, so if this used these, there would be no thread marks. It'd be hard to tell if there was ever one attached or not. And now we can see side by side, so obviously we're missing a section here, but otherwise it's rather similar. I've got the RF chassis pulled out now, and I'm starting to clean it up and go over things. I already put on new rubber mounts on the side. Now I'm working on the tuning mechanism. I took off the dial scale and the switch mechanism for the three different bands. And while doing so, I noticed something curious. It says 37-610 on here, even though this is a model 611. I imagine they share a similar tuning mechanism. And what I'm working on right now is this guy, which is the vernier drive for the tuning, so coarse and fine tuning, as I showed in the 37-640 restoration. This can be popped open and cleaned up. I do the same thing here. So you got to remove snap ring from here, push on the back, and this center pops out, and 4 ball bearings are inside of there. Probably all very gunked up. This works, but could be a little bit smoother, so I'm going to get that all cleaned out, some degreaser, and then pack in some new grease, put it back together. Here it is, repacked with grease, nice smooth action. So let's get that reinstalled. Let's see how it works. Alright, cool. Now we'll move on to electronics and finally get at those 2 paper caps I wasn't able to get at before. There's one down in there, and one right there. Still can't really get at them, but these sides come off. Just gonna take off a few 1/4-inch screws and make sure we get right in there. So this is kind of an oddball one. It's actually a dual cap. The description, I've never actually seen one up close before. So we got one wire coming out of this end, and a bunch of electrical tape, what appears to be electrical tape, and connection coming through this end, and then 2 coming out of the middle. So I'll have to study the schematic a little to see exactly how that's wired, and use 2 individual capacitors accordingly. I removed that old electrical tape so I could see the wiring. So we had one cap one end, one the other, and a common negative in the middle, with the metal collar wrapped around. One lead is going off to a common negative for the electrolytic, and this connects somewhere else on one of the other chassis. So be careful to preserve that wiring. So I think I'll just try to reuse this center metal tab here and attach one capacitor there, one there, not a replacements. Well, you know me, once I get going I just can't resist tearing things all apart and cleaning them thoroughly. So here's that RF deck with corrosion and dirt and filth cleaned off. I'm working on the tuning cap, and I also want to restuff that electrolytic. When I previously had powered this up, after a quick recap, I just tacked in a couple below, but now that I've got it taken apart, it gives me an opportunity to actually restuff the cap. It's a little bit different than typical Philco caps I've seen, that well, it's short. And it's because it's a lower working voltage. I'm used to working on transformer-based sets, where you'd have caps that are more like rated for 475 volts, to be much taller. This is also a bit different because it's well, it's 2 caps in one, but also has the cardboard on it, as do the other 2, which is for safety because one side of them is going to the AC line, sort of. Look on the schematic, see there's a switch, but it doesn't go directly to ground. It goes through 90 ohm resistor and a pilot light in parallel, and then it goes to the ground on the various components. So I think that was to maybe develop a bit of a negative bias. Well, they've also got another resistor in here serving that purpose as well. It's hard to read, 20 ohm, 80 ohm, I'm not quite sure. So that 16 microfarad, that'd be your main filter cap after the rectifier. And that feeds two separate filter chokes. So this makes me wonder why is this really an economical design? It was the addition of all these extra components. They got a can dome resistor they had to add, two filter chokes, and some extra filter caps. So you could alternately, the other versions of these sets uses a power transformer and no filter chokes. So two filter chokes plus more capacitance versus just a power transformer, conventional design. I don't know. This doesn't seem to me to be all that much of a savings. Anyway. So I'm going to see about getting this cardboard base off, and then cut this sucker open, run a couple new caps inside. Here's what I found when I cut that can open. All dried out and absolutely no good, so clean all that out. Drill some holes, mount the new caps inside, wrap some aluminum tape around that to hold it back together, slide the cardboard over it, and remount it on the chassis. Here's the capacitor, restuffed, drilled some small holes for each of the positive leads and one for the common negative. And then I sealed the can back up with some aluminum tape. Put the cardboard back over it and remount it and wire it in. So I finished the RF tuning chassis. There's the Rubo capacitor installed. Use a little terminal strip for the common there, which does not connect to the chassis, and several other components connect to it, and some wiring, so I figured terminal strip was the best way to go for that. And there's the dual cap. It's been replaced with a couple yellow Illinois capacitors, and down in there, hard to see, but there are a couple new resistors and a new capacitor as well. So got that all buttoned up and cleaned up. New rubber shock mounts installed, including one on the back of the tuning capacitor. So I got that put on the side, and I'm moving on to the other two chassis. And what I'm doing right now is cleaning this off. I've seen this once before, I think on a Philco 643 farm radio, where what I believe has happened is tar or wax or some substance has leaked out of these. In this case, filter chokes. On the other chassis, it was an output transformer, and coated the chassis. I'm using some naphtha paint thinner to remove it. Nice side effect is that it keeps the chassis quite clean underneath. Just a little tedious to clean off. A few rust spots here and there where I guess this substance didn't coat it well enough. I'll get that cleaned off and then start working underneath. So I want to undo some of the work I did before, namely take these filter caps and put them inside these cans and replace some of the resistors, which I did not do first time around. First pass I only replaced the capacitors. I don't even think I checked these, but I have checked some of them now, and they are definitely have drifted off of tolerance, so those will have to go. Alright, we got that all cleaned up. There's a little bit of corrosion on top of these chokes. I cleared that off. Now some bare metal exposed, so I'll touch it up with some black paint. And I went ahead and pulled these caps out, which I'd already disconnected when I did my earlier recap. Now I want to do a little more thorough restoration and restuff these. So very similar to the cap on the RF tuning chassis, where it was a cardboard over metal, insulated from the chassis, and it's a 2-section cap inside. Yellow, 20 microfarad, 150 volts, and uncoated, which I assume they mean no color, 10 microfarad and only 25 volts. So cut this open. Oh, and if you're wondering, I tried to check this. It's essentially no capacitance, or very, very little. Electrolyte is all dried out. Little vent hole here in the top. It's been, I don't know if it ruptured or just punctured or what the deal is over time, but these weren't sealed very well, so it may very well just have evaporated over time, or it may have developed a short and internal heating caused it to vent. And this is just a big old single section. This is a main filter cap, I think, for the power supply. I cut it open with a little mini hacksaw and pulled out the insides with a corkscrew, and here they are. So, a rather early electrolytic cap. It's actually held together by some rubber bands around the outside, and like I said, all dried out and no good anymore. So, toss that, clean this out a bit, clean that out a bit, drill some holes and hide the new caps inside, and then put it all back together and remount it and wire it back in.